Hello, I have perfected Animal Well on Steam by collecting all 20 achievements. This includes finding a secret egg, popping 1,000 bubbles, leaving the well, and a few more we'll touch on a bit later. Welcome to my full review. Animal Well is a single-player, surreal puzzle platform Metrovania being developed by Billy Basso and published by Big Mode. You can watch my full playthrough on my second channel if you so desire. However, starting off with the settings. Visually, it's gorgeous and they nailed the aesthetic they were going for. There isn't all that much here. It's one page long and incredibly simple, which is to be expected from a 2D pixel platformer that's a whopping 33 megabytes. You can choose between 3 different graphic options: good, better, or best. I love that. You have the option to turn off scan lines, however I recommend keeping them on as it doesn't look or feel the same. Also, it's just nostalgic. The dev heavily recommends using a controller to play, and I completely second this as the game will feel a whole lot better with one. It's playable without, but not as smooth of a feeling. This is the first game I've played in a while that successfully registered me using a PlayStation controller without having to change or use anything else. Good job. If it doesn't show properly for you, or you're using a third-party setup, you have the option to override your style to whichever you prefer, which is of course lovely. However, you are not given the option to change any of the key bindings, except for flipping confirm and cancel, which is beyond strange. Rebindable keys are such a huge necessity for most players, and not including this in your game makes no sense in this day and age. It bothers me even more because there is a controls tab at the very top of this page, which could have easily allowed rebinding in or under it. Anyway, there is a large selection of language options, which is always great to see. The last option I'll mention is show time, which shows you exactly how long you've spent in-game on that save at the top right of your screen. Very helpful for speedrunners or those just curious. You can also see the time at any given time by just pausing the game. Now for the technical side of things, please note I'm running this off of a low to high-end PC, so how this performs for me might not perform the same for you. With that being said, I experienced literally no issues whatsoever. If I did, I would be surprised. This game runs purely off your CPU, and a graphics card is literally not required. This should easily run off your mother's LCD 1080p full-screen toaster with no problems at all. As for the difficulty options, there are none. The difficulty comes down to the 4 layers of depth Animal has to offer and how deep you're willing to go into the puzzles. For a base playthrough, I'd say the game is fairly easy with random spikes in difficulty depending on your own struggles. As you'd expect from any Metrovania, if you don't find what you need, you'll be wandering around aimlessly for a little while. As for the true endgame experience, the difficulty ramps up beyond anything I could have expected. It's one of those games where I recommend sitting by with a pen and paper at the ready, assuming you wish to solve the puzzles yourself. I went through 3 full sheets of paper before realizing I couldn't comprehend the insane amount of puzzle depth alone. Some of the puzzles are quite literally impossible to find a solution for yourself and require a community effort to complete. Keep that in mind going into the deep end. You will not have to worry about this until you've completed the first 2 endings. As for the replayability, with the 4 layers of depth, you technically have a bare minimum of 4 playthroughs, all being different from one another. Past that, I can only see the replayability in search of puzzles not currently found or solved. The game itself says we'll be discovering puzzles for years, so hopefully that is true. Speaking of gameplay, in short, Animal Well is a puzzle-focused platform Metrovania with vast exploration, slight horror elements, a cute surreal pixel atmosphere, and an insane amount of secrets. Starting from the very beginning, there's a double-edged sword, and that's with hand-holding. You're immediately thrown into the game after an 8-second cutscene of watching flames vanish and waking up from your egg, flower, thingy. That is all the information you're given. There is no tutorial section or much guidance past that. You're expected to explore and figure literally everything out for yourself. Now while I know that sounds terrible, and in a few instances such as the 3rd and 4th endings, it will be, but Animal Well does an incredible job at spacing out everything it wants you to collect well within your path to any objective you're trying to push. There isn't much need for guidance, at least for most of the base layered experience, which majority of that will be exploring the world, doing precise platforming, solving simple puzzles, and looking for chests. Once opened, they will provide you a new fun tool to play around and progress with, or simply a secret egg. Speaking of the fun tools, there are technically around 21 you'll come across by simply just playing through, thoroughly exploring, and collecting all 65 eggs, all of which are not required to complete the first ending. I say technically as there are tools you'll obtain that may have little use face value but have a complicated endgame puzzle attached to it, such as the map tools. I use them for marking stuff I missed, the community uses it to mark symbols corresponding to different rooms and connecting them to a numeric code. Yep, my bad. There are also tools you never know existed unless you messed around hard enough, cheat, or break the game. Did you know you can use your mouse or touchpad to interact with the environment? Or that if you play in windowed mode and shake the screen, it also messes with the world's physics? Both of these are also tied to secrets I obviously won't spoil. The level of depth that went into just how the items function and work together in various non-obvious ways is astonishing. That being said, a few tools were a bit annoying. The yo-yo, for example, feels horrible to control in most instances, while the ball was extremely underutilized, and you miss an entire section by just simply not having the ball hit a very specific spot. Now, what sets Animal Well apart from other Metrovanias, aside from its obvious layered complexity, is the lack of combat. There are threats, environmental dangers, and even boss fights, but the game is built around avoiding them or using your tools to distract, break, or banish them in some puzzly way. Some of the threats can be more annoying than others, but once you find a solution to dealing with them, your life becomes much easier. Shocker. I know. I think no combat works incredibly well here because the game's main focus is around its platforming and in-depth puzzles, which, if you're going into the game expecting, you will be ecstatic and get way more from it than someone who goes in expecting a generic Metrovania. Now, for a streamlined or single completion, you can expect a lot of puzzles to be fairly straightforward. Depending how you play, it's possible you'll stumble across the more obscure ones, but nothing too difficult. An all-around fun time for Layer 1. If you go for the second ending in Layer 2, the difficulty will ramp up a bit, followed by a lot of backtracking. You'll need to find the remaining eggs you missed prior, and while most are in obvious places, a good few can be easily missed if you're not exploring thoroughly enough. Now, if that wasn't enough, in Layer 3, the endgame puzzles get ramped up to a 5 out of 5 donkeys and start getting into the more impossible to figure out solutions. For example, this is an in-your-face puzzle which is shown pretty much at the very start of the game and required a full-on community effort taking over 50 people to complete. That's when you know Billy is not messing around, and this is when the game's puzzles become extremely difficult and mostly all out of the box thinking. Don't worry though, if those weren't enough, there is a fourth layer to the madness. These include ciphers, unicodes, binary, time travel, speedrunning, cross saves, sequence breaking, you name it, the list goes on. It's absolutely insane. If you're as small-brained as I, or curious on the more complicated puzzles, Fury Forged on YouTube has a lot of amazing videos going over all of the endings and secrets in great depth. I don't know him personally, but his videos are well made and guided me through my struggles with ease. His link will also be in the description below. Now, I tried my absolute hardest to complete as much as I could without a guide, but the amount of puzzles that require community effort, vast uncommon knowledge, or the internet made it feel impossible for my small brain to comprehend the majority of the puzzles, even with the guides explaining the solutions to me. I have no idea how one person came up with these puzzles, let alone the community who managed to solve them. Incredible work to everybody. Now, that being said, I can't say I'm the biggest fan of having a large majority of puzzles in a single player game requiring an online community effort to solve. I can get behind a handful being thrown in, but to have the majority of the endgame feel impossible to solve individually, it's just not an overall fun experience. Some of the puzzles are extremely unfair and downright tedious to complete, even with a guide by your side. However, I will include the final secret ending was extremely wholesome and made pushing through that pain worth it, though I'm unsure if many will agree. So if you aren't super into puzzles or cipher solving, I don't think you'll enjoy it much past its second ending, so keep that noted. Now, there isn't much to say about the UI aside from it being incredibly simple, which of course I love. I do wish I had the option to move my hearts around, but that's a very nitpicky complaint. Going back a bit and touching on the platforming, it's very precise, touchy, and honestly it feels great. The tools you'll obtain while playing can also provide extra movement mechanics if used as such. The bubble wand, for example, allows you to spawn bubbles, which you'll watch rise before using it to double jump onto higher ledges. It can also be used to float down. You can then abuse this wand by timing your jump and bubble spamming together to provide yourself infinite jump height. This is incredibly useful to learn as early as possible, and yes, you can shoot the bubble beneath your feet. I didn't know this until it was too late. Anyway, moving into the wonderful world of Animal Well. Visually, it's remarkable. I love the retro scanline aesthetic, and I think it fits the world perfectly. Without it, it looks quite bland and foreign. Billy did an insane job at creating a world so large that every screen you enter feels unique and most likely has one or more secrets hidden within it. The only downsides are you'll be backtracking a lot if you happen to miss literally anything relevant to the layer you're trying to complete. And the level design itself, while being incredible, can be very confusing in the earlier stages of the game. With the world being so large, you are eventually given two ways of travel. The first you'll stumble across very quickly, the telephone. These are also your save points. You can abuse these by saving in a location you'll want to come back. If you manage to take enough damage to faint, you'll be teleported right back here with all that you've completed, just with one less hit point, so make sure you utilize these berries. It is also important to mention that water does not hurt you. If you happen to fall into it, instead of taking damage, you will simply be teleported back to the ledge you jumped from. The second, if you stumble across it, is the flute. You'll be able to use it in various ways, but also for teleportation. It opens animals' mouths, which provides a teleport hub to most of the main world's section. This is the most helpful way of travel, however, there is a lot of puzzles attached to it. There are a few other ways you could technically travel around, but I'll let you figure those out for yourself. As for the map, starting with the positives, I like the way it uncovers as you slowly progress it, and it's very nicely color-coded corresponding to its residing animal's aesthetic. However, the map is very confusing to read once you've uncovered the majority of it. There isn't always an obvious location you can see yourself missing, as some are extremely well hidden. My biggest complaint is how the world loops around itself horizontally, but only in certain locations. It makes exploring and egg hunting a bit more obnoxious, as there isn't a clear path to some places. If you have amnesia or suffer with directional awareness, you're going to have a bad time even with the tools provided. So expect to add a few extra hours on top of exploration backtracking. They handle this well once you obtain the flute, but it can be frustrating getting lost with no real objective going forward. As for the audio, the music and ambience all set the moods extremely well all throughout the game. Not a single complaint or hiccup here. I will say none of the tracks stood out while playing aside from the main menu theme. The bass it provides shakes my peanut brain around, and I love that. Hey, you've made it to the story section and my thoughts on it. I won't be covering the spoilers in depth, but if you'd like to avoid them, skip ahead to the positive and negative section below. Ready? In Animal Well, you're sent down a well full of animals. Damn. You play as a little blob fella hatched from a flower who has amnesia. Sorry. You seem to have no story or lore, but unrelated obvious goals of exploring the world around you, obtaining flames, and an unhealthy obsession of collecting eggs. Now I feel like there may be a very deep hidden story being told here, but it's very hard to tell. There is little to nothing to grasp onto aside from the obvious objectives. It may be all up to your own interpretation, but if lore eventually spills, I would love to know about it. As mentioned before, there are a total of 20 achievements, all of which took me 22 hours to obtain, with a single playthrough taking around 8. I will not be mentioning the ones handed to you just by playing, however, let's start with Back and Forth Forever. You'll eventually obtain a frisbee, which you can simply ride back and forth forever. Why? Because you have egg well is obtained by successfully finding all of the secret eggs. Some are extremely well hidden, but an all-around fun achievement to obtain, and a guide is not required for them. No cheating here. Good ending is obtained not by finishing the game, but getting your soul crushed by a mama chinchilla. Oh yeah. Now the hardest achievement award will be going to Sneak, where you must sneak up on a squirrel and take his nut. In hindsight, this achievement can be fairly easy to obtain if you know about it prior to going in. That's because the squirrels can be taken as a sign of progression. You scare them off while entering new areas, and if you happen to scare them all off and complete the game, well, this achievement becomes impossible on that world save. Absolutely not speaking from an annoying experience. All in all, the majority, if not all the achievements can be obtained by simply completing the first 2 endings and never having to touch the extra 2 layers of insane puzzle depth this game has to offer. While the achievements clearly take the more casual approach, and for hunters who like a quick grab, it's perfect. But for how this game is, I think there was a missed opportunity to include a whole lot more. There could have been more achievements tied to the rabbits, the secret endings, community efforts, references, and so forth. The puzzles themselves provide endless achievement opportunities, but very little of them was taken. I was honestly shocked to see the achievements not including a puzzle or cipher of their very own. Now that is a great idea I would love to see utilized or referenced come the second game if you're still listening, Billy. Anyway, now let's go over some of the positives. The entire experience, including the engine, is made up by a single guy out of pure love and passion. That alone is worth supporting. The game has multiple layers of depth and endings. It's absolutely gorgeous with its own retro aesthetic. The puzzles can make you feel extremely clever. It has the most unique and well thought out tools I've seen in any Metroidvania thus far. Last but not least, it's short and sweet for a base playthrough. As for the negatives, there's no hand-holding, guidance, or clues whatsoever. A lot of backtracking and wandering around aimlessly. It can become extremely frustrating at times. You have to go into the game knowing you won't be able to solve literally every puzzle yourself. Some puzzles can be tedious, and there is absolutely no combat and only hazards. As for a neutral, the community, time-gated, and ARG puzzles can be very hit or miss depending how you feel about them. In conclusion, Animal Well was or can be a very difficult puzzle platformer. I had a lot of fun with it, and I'm excited to see what the community pulls up from the well as time goes on. Do I recommend it? Well, Animal Well is currently available for 32 Canadian doll hairs or your regional equivalent on Steam, PlayStation, and the Nintendo Switch store. There appears to be no current plans of release on Xbox or Game Pass. If you somehow can't justify the fairly cheap price, I can easily recommend wishlisting and waiting for a sale. I obviously heavily recommend it, however you must have the full expectation going in you can't solve everything in the endgame yourself, no matter how hard you try. Once you're past the first two endings, figure out as much as you can, but if you're ever stuck for too long, you may have to consult the interwebs, as that puzzle may literally be impossible for you. It's not for everyone, but it's worth the try. I think the biggest puzzle of all is how the game is under 40 megabytes. Anyway, thank you so much for watching if you made it this far. Let me know your thoughts down below, or what game I should complete next. Subscribe so you never miss a video, and until next time, take care.